In 1902, workmen digging water cisterns for a new housing development in Paola, Malta, broke through a rock ceiling and dropped into a room no one had entered in 4,500 years. They did not report it. They kept working. They used the hole as somewhere to put their own rubble. Years later, a Maltese doctor named Themistocles Zammit was sorting through what survived. From one block of earth roughly 3 meters long, 1 meter wide, and 1 meter deep, he recovered 119 right kneecaps. A right patella comes one to a person. 119 of them means at least 120 human beings packed into a volume about the size of a small car. Zammit scaled that up across the site. He arrived at 7,000. That number is now in the UNESCO citation. It is on the placards, in the guidebooks, and in every documentary made about this place. Almost nobody who repeats it knows it began as arithmetic performed on kneecaps in one corner of one chamber. This is the Ħal Saflieni Hypogeum, 3 stories cut down into solid limestone using flint, chert, obsidian, and antler. No metal, no writing, no explanation. 80 people a day are allowed inside. Nobody went looking for the Hypogeum. It was found by accident, by people who did not want to have found it. In 1902, Paola was being extended, and Maltese houses need water. The island has almost no accessible groundwater, so the standard practice was cutting a cistern into the soft globigerina limestone beneath the house. One of those cistern shafts broke through into a void. The workmen tried to keep it quiet. A significant find on a building plot means inspectors and delays. So instead of reporting it, they used the void as a convenient place to dump their spoil. We do not know how much was destroyed in that period, and the only people who could have quantified it were the ones getting rid of it. In 1903, the Museums Committee put Father Emmanuel Magri in charge, a Jesuit priest, philologist, and serious intellectual figure who spent his life recording Maltese folklore before it vanished. He understood the value of a record. That's what makes what happened next so bad. Magri excavated the upper level for roughly 4 years. In 1907, the Jesuits sent him to Tunisia on mission work. He died there the same year. His report on the Hypogeum was lost, not suppressed, lost, in the ordinary way things vanish when a man dies abroad without duplicates and nobody knows which papers matter. Understand what that costs. In a burial site, position matters more than the object. Which bones lay with which, what was placed with them, and which layer sat on top. That exists in exactly one place, the excavator's notebook. Once the earth moves, it cannot be reobserved. Magri's 4 years are, archaeologically, a blank. Contemporary accounts describe material from that period being discarded uncatalogued. So by the time the Hypogeum came under proper scientific control, it had already survived 2 rounds of destruction. Builders dumping into it, then a 4-year excavation whose entire documentary output evaporated. And in 1908, while excavation was still underway, the site was open to visitors. Every claim in the rest of this video has to be read through that filter. The Hypogeum is not a sealed tomb. that gave up its secrets intact. It is a crime scene partially bulldozed, investigated by a man whose case file was never found. Themistocles Zamet was a physician and bacteriologist before he was an archaeologist. In 1905, he identified goats as the vector for Malta fever, effectively eliminating the disease from the islands. He was knighted for it in 1930. He was also the first director of the National Museum of Archaeology, and he excavated Tarxian, Hypogeum, and Menajdra, all now UNESCO sites, alongside the Hypogeum. Zamet took over after Magri's death, publishing reports from 1910. The difference between the two excavations is the difference between a rumor and a record. Zamet published. That's why we know anything at all. What he found was not laid out bodies in coffins. The remains were disarticulated, mixed together, heaped in chambers and niches, stained with red ochre, a place used and reused from roughly 4000 to 2500 BC, 1500 years, 60 generations. Zamet needed an estimate of how many people were represented, so he counted a bone that occurs exactly once per person, right kneecaps. From roughly 3 cubic meters of deposit, 119 right patella, a minimum of about 120 individuals in that block. He extrapolated across the whole site and arrived at 7,000. Heritage Malta itself, the agency that manages the site, has stated plainly that 7,000 was only an estimate calculated from that limited sample. It's the officially cited figure. UNESCO uses it. Heritage Malta uses it. And it isn't a fringe number. But it's an extrapolation, not a count, performed on a site that had already lost an unknown fraction of its contents. The Smithsonian, reporting on the 2017 reopening, gave the more conservative figure of over 6,000. The honest statement, 7,000, is a defensible order of magnitude estimate, made by a careful scientist on a damaged sample. It is not a body count. Nobody has ever counted 7,000 people at Ħal Saflieni. And divided by the duration, 7,000 burials across 1,500 years is fewer than 5 people a year. Not a catastrophe, not a plague pit, but a community cemetery, working steadily for longer than the span between the Roman Empire and today. The remains have never been subjected to a full modern osteological reassessment at the scale the number deserves. Nobody knows how many people are actually in that building. We only know how many kneecaps were in one corner of it. Set the bones aside, because the astonishing thing about Ħal Saflieni isn't what's in it, it's the thing itself. Roughly 500 square meters across 3 levels, descending about 10.6 meters below present road level, cut entirely with chert, flint, obsidian, and antler. No metal existed on Malta at the time. Every cubic meter was removed by a human being hitting rock with stone or antler, then carrying the debris out by hand in the dark. The middle level is where this stops being a cave and becomes architecture. The chambers deliberately imitate Malta's above-ground megalithic temples, false bays modelled on trilithon doorways, carved windows, ceilings where a ring of stone overhangs to imitate a corbelled roof. A trilithon is 2 uprights and a lintel, a structural solution for holding up a roof. In solid rock, there is no roof to hold up. A trilithon carved into living rock is structurally meaningless. It's pure quotation. These people went underground and reproduced, in negative, the visual language of the buildings they made in daylight. The showpiece is the Holy of Holies, a porthole set within a trilithon, framed within larger trilithons, carved entirely from living rock, with a corbelled ceiling. Malta's surface temples have all lost their roofs. Nobody knows for certain how they were covered. The Hypogeum's stone roof can't fall down, and it's corbelled, a strong hint the surface temples were roofed the same way. No bones were recovered from this room. The most elaborate chamber in the complex apparently wasn't a burial chamber. The walls carry patterns painted in red ochre, spirals, spots, honeycomb designs, the only surviving prehistoric wall painting in the Maltese Islands, and the reason the entire conservation regime exists. And in the main chamber, Zamet's excavation produced the object that became Malta's national icon, a 12-centimetre clay figurine of a woman lying on her side, asleep, the couch modelled underneath as well as on top. She's called the Sleeping Lady, now in the National Museum of Archaeology. What she represents? Death, sleep, a goddess, an ordinary sleeping woman, is genuinely unknown. Every reading is interpretation. She was found in a building full of the dead, lying down, eyes closed. That's the whole of the evidence. Now the part of this story that's been repeated most and gotten most wrong. The claim in circulation, a chamber called the Oracle Room, resonates at 110 Hz, a frequency matched to the male voice, altering brain activity to induce trance. Almost every element of that is unverified or directly contradicted by the best available measurement. The Oracle Room is real, a small chamber with a niche cut into one wall and painted ochre spirals, and its powerful acoustics have been noted since at least 1920. But the 110 Hz figure doesn't come from Malta at all. It comes from a 2008 lab study by Cook, Pajot, and Leuchter on unrelated chambers, later welded onto the Hypogeum. A 2014 study at the Hypogeum itself by Debatolis, Coimbra, and Enaix reported resonance at 70 and 114 Hz, using human voices, a conch shell, and a bullhorn as sound sources. It appeared in a journal published by an organization on Beale's list of potential predatory publishers, which doesn't automatically make the measurements wrong, but means published research is doing more work in the retellings than it's earned. In 2017, Rupert Till of the University of Huddersfield published a proper study in the mainstream peer-reviewed journal Antiquity, using a calibrated loudspeaker, sine sweep, and measurement microphones, removing the human variable entirely. What he actually measured: the Oracle Chamber's primary resonances are 41, 72, and 75 to 76 Hz, not 110. Reverberation reaches 16 seconds at 63 Hz. Cathedral scale decay in a room you could cross in a few paces. Sound in the Oracle Chamber is roughly 7 times louder when heard elsewhere on the same level, confirming the 1920 observation. The corrections. The male voice claim fails. Till found the difference in speech intelligibility between male and female voices was below the threshold of perceptibility. The niche fails to hold up as a deliberate acoustic device. Its effects were inconsistent. And the oracle room isn't even the most acoustically powerful space in the complex. The main hall's resonance is lower and more powerful. The famous frequency is wrong. The gender claim is wrong. The famous room isn't the best room. What survives is still remarkable. 16 seconds of reverberation, 7-fold amplification. And Till's own conclusion that the acoustics must have held particular ritual significance. But nobody has demonstrated the acoustics were designed rather than discovered. Two stories have attached themselves to Ħal Saflieni harder than any others. Heritage Malta has answered both on the record. First, the skulls. Zammit described some crania as long-headed, dolichocephalic, a routine, ordinary craniometric term describing a proportion, not a deformity. That phrase, lifted out of context, became elongated skulls, then a comparison to artificially deformed South American crania, then a claim about a non-human population under Malta. Heritage Malta's answer is direct. The skulls are no more elongated than modern-day crania. The skulls didn't go missing either. 6 fragmented ones were removed from display in 1995 when the museum closed for refurbishment and went into ordinary reserve storage, where every museum keeps the overwhelming majority of its holdings. In December 2020, Heritage Malta put them back on display in an exhibition titled, pointedly, Alien Headaches, the Hypogeum Skulls Enigma, the National Heritage Agency naming an exhibit after the conspiracy theory specifically to answer it in a glass case. Worth noting separately, a current biology study from 2022 sequenced ancient genomes from Neolithic Malta, not from Ħal Saflieni itself, but a comparable site on Gozo. The individuals were unremarkable Neolithic Europeans from a small, isolated, inbred island population. Not a direct test of these remains, but the only ancient DNA evidence we have. And it points at ordinary human beings. These were people. They had families. They buried each other here for 15 centuries. That deserves to be said plainly. Second, the lost school party. The story that in 1940, Maltese schoolchildren entered a tunnel and were never seen again. The traceable source is a line in the August 1940 National Geographic, reporting word of mouth that the government closed tunnels after children became lost. It was later greatly expanded by a fringe publisher into giant humanoids and a candle-snuffing wind. Heritage Malta's answer? None of it is substantiated by local newspapers or resident accounts, and there are no signs of collapse in the Hypogeum. A whole class vanishing in a country the size of 1940s, Malta would have been the defining local event of the decade. It's in nobody's newspaper. What actually threatens the Hypogeum isn't tunnels, it's breathing. The site closed from 1991 to 2000, and Heritage Malta capped access at 80 visitors a day in groups of 10 with no children under 6. Human respiration changes carbon dioxide, humidity, and temperature. Skin oils degrade the pigment. Light promotes microorganism growth. A closure from 2016 to 2017 installed a new microclimate system, funded partly through an EEA grant of €829,175, against a final cost of €1.14 million. The site now receives roughly 26,000 visitors a year, for a monument that stood 5,000 years unattended. The Ħal Saflieni Hypogeum does not need to be inflated. Strip out the aliens, the 110 Hertz, the missing skulls, and the lost children. And what remains is harder to explain than any of them. A society with no metal and no writing went down into the rock with flint and antler and carved a building. Not a cave, a building with doorways that hold nothing up and a ceiling that imitates a roof it does not need. They painted it. They put their dead in it, in numbers we still cannot count, for 1,500 years. Then they stopped and left nothing that says why. And the one man who watched the upper level come out of the ground took his notes with him to Tunisia in 1907 and died there. Somewhere, in some box, that report may still exist. Nobody has ever found it.